Welcome to the Coach Podcast with Coach Keren Eldad. Settle in. We're about to make you feel really good.
Kathy, I'm lost, I said, though I knew she was sleeping. I'm empty and aching, and I don't know why. Simon and Garfunkel, America. Welcome back, everybody, to the Coach Podcast. We dive into the fears and challenges that hold overachievers back and explore ways to overcome them for a more fulfilling life around here. I'm your host, Coach Keren Eldad, and today we're tackling a second big feelings of emptiness that are also typical of the overachiever experience. Before I dive in, I want you to remember that this podcast is a prelude and companion to my first book, Gilded, Breaking Free from the Cage of Ambition, Perfectionism, and the Relentless Pursuit of More. I'd love you to read it, and you can get your copy right now on our website, www.breakfreewithgilded.com. Now, you may have already deduced from the title that this series and this episode is not for everyone. Well, it isn't. So it is for the subset of people who are high performers in the main arenas of their life, who are living with intensity, who are constantly pushing for more, who are driven by the relentless pursuit of success. These are the people for whom this particular season of the Coached Podcast is dedicated. The last one was dedicated to people in midlife. And that's because chances are you, really need it. In coaching thousands of people who fit this profile over my decade of work as an executive coach, I have found that beneath the surface, overachievers often grapple with feelings of emptiness and the weight of unmet expectations. If even a whisper of recognition stirs within you at hearing this episode, then today's episode is for you. This series holds also the path out that you seek. In the series, I'm going to show you the exact ways in which you can do this and how you can rebuild your reality from the inside out to overcome any feelings of emptiness, of aimlessness, of loneliness. Last week, we began with highlighting the importance of understanding the two worldviews that might be driving the way that you think, believe, and act, and identifying yours. If you haven't listened, go back and listen now. We also imparted a tool with which you can begin to counter these patterns so that you can stop causing yourself dissatisfaction and malaise. Today, we're going to step fully into the abyss, or to borrow from Joseph Campbell, we're going to step into and peer into the cave that you're fearing to enter. We're going to go even farther than just awareness. Now let's proceed with the second thought that we want to explore here. I feel empty. I feel aimless. These belie similar emotions. They're very uncomfortable emotions. That's why most of us don't even recognize them when they're in the background. But let's go there. You may have noticed that this episode opens with a song lyric. It's one that I've loved since I was a little kid. Simon and Garfunkel's beautiful song, America. It's a stunning song, and if you know it, I'm sure you love it too. The song, America, was written and composed by Paul Simon, and it's about young lovers who are hitchhiking their way across the United States in search of America, in both a literal and figurative sense. They're looking for freedom. I found it incredibly apt, and I found that lyric, that one line, Kathy, I'm lost, I said, though I knew she was sleeping. I'm empty and aching, and I don't know why. I found that to be a line that always knocks me out, and it's not just because of the lilt in Simon's voice. It's because of the poignancy. Simon knows your soul. He knows the feeling of feeling lost. And in this lyric, he captures not only it, but how hard it is for us to admit it, waiting many times for Kathy to be asleep before we even say it out loud. Have you ever felt this way? Do you feel this way right now? If you do, it's okay. You're in good company. And I'm going to say again and again in this series, all overachievers feel this way sometimes. You're in the company of one of America's founding fathers, too, Alexander Hamilton. In Ron Chernow's biography of Hamilton, he writes that Hamilton always had to fight the residual sadness of the driven man. That sentence stayed with me. And by the way, watching Hamilton the musical, I'm Never Satisfied, the song, is literally about this. And just like the Simon and Garfunkel lyric, as an executive coach to prominent overachievers, I've noticed that there can be something sad about extremely ambitious people. Like they're striving furiously to fill a hole that was carved into them by traumatic experiences during childhood, like bullying or neglect or isolation, like not having Netflix. That was a joke. And though they have gained immense external measures of success on the inside, many of them never quite succeed in truly getting over this, which is why it's so wonderful to see them finally in coaching. Otherwise, they will stay empty and aching, and worst of all, not knowing why. Also, because this came to my door too. I can personally relate. I too lived in a paranoia in perpetuity state, compromising my self-regard, subsuming myself in relationships, and making totally, today, to my mind, idiotic decisions, like social climbing that really drove a lot of my actions, when I am literally none of the above things, and when my gut was screaming at me not to do this anymore. I remember once, for example, just a tiny anecdote, I remember once I was racking up a large sum on my credit card to travel to and look appropriate in an event hosted by some spare royals in London. They were the Duke and Duchess of Wessex, whatever Wessex is, whom I had never heard of and whom I didn't really get to meet. And I went into debt for that nonsense. Much worse than such a silly social climbing side effect of ambition, the lostness in me was one so pervasive that I ended up in a loveless and abusive marriage, completely abandoning myself for years. This is a trap with which you may be familiar too. The obligation to maintain achievement and to uphold performance can be a form of indentured servitude, and therefore I posit that we end up feeling lost, mostly because, in the process of trying so hard to achieve and exceed, we lose ourselves. I offer my introductory personal story today to say that by self-sabotage, I'm not just talking about missing a reunion like the story I shared in episode 1. I'm talking about the pervasive stuff that we hate to look at, but that affects us all, and that the collective effects of which really start to turn into self-betrayal. Things like debt, messy and ugly divorces, lovely, long-standing marriages, intimacy issues, infidelity, isolation, paranoia, mistrust, harsh management styles, alcohol, pill and scrolling addictions, artificial friendships, strained familial and business relationships, and illness. These are all forms of trying to mask emptiness. And the most common form of sabotage of all is that feeling of being lost, being ignored, the aimlessness not being paid attention to. Aimlessness is harboring for long stretches of time the feeling that life is moving along, but you have not yet found your purpose, or that you're somehow stuck. You're living, but you don't feel lit up from inside. Like somehow you're doing all the things, but you're missing your potential. And for some reason, TikTok is more interesting. That's the main crux of all suffering. You're empty and aching, and you don't know why. And you're spending so much time numbing, you don't even acknowledge it. And that's why this particular emotion is the one that compelled me the most to chase down the why. It's the straightforward way of explaining why this happens. And that is, like I shared in episode 1, first, you haven't aimed at happiness because your worldview was already rigged against happiness. You were very likely just in survival. And that usually means to an overachiever, money and status or power. The accumulation of things will keep me safe, rather than let's aim for things that are, let's say, more ephemeral or more abstract. In today's episode, I want to establish as a next step that extraordinary success, while yes, it can make you rich and powerful, it can also leave you bored and dissatisfied and incurious and blinkered to new possibilities and empty. It can make you resistant to change, invulnerable, deeply unhappy, and ultimately not living anywhere close to your full potential. As my favorite intellectual Yuval Noah Harari often says, this is the true paradox of power indeed. It is indeed the paradox of our times. He says, on the Adam Grant podcast, looking at the whole of human history, I can summarize it very briefly. As a species, we're extremely successful in gaining power, but we are not very good at translating that power into happiness. This is a huge, huge problem, he says, and this is why we should focus less on power and more on happiness. And I say, well said, Professor Harari. In rowing too hard in the opposite direction of happiness, you also get exhausted and deflated by the aimlessness and the force with which you are rowing. In other words, you start splitting against yourself, and you keep splitting. Now finally your soul can't take it anymore. You will not be able to solve this with an MBA, or with a new marriage, or with a big promotion, or with a trip to Paris to see Taylor Swift. You are going to have to go inward now, deeper than just, where's my worldview operating from? You are going to have to grapple with who you are and with what you truly want. And you will have to aim from there at happiness. You're going to have to realize that when Ferris Bueller says in the movie Ferris Bueller, life goes by fast. If you don't stop and look around occasionally, you could miss it, that he's talking to you. And he's giving you an exact prescription. Slow down now. If you don't, let it be from this point on at your own peril. I've seen clients run themselves into the ground because they were so committed to not stopping, to not looking inward, that they literally became very, very ill. It's like their bodies stopped them so that they could force themselves into doing the work. When high-profile figures such as iconic fashion designer Kate Spade, TV celebrity Anthony Bourdain, or the comedian Robin Williams die by suicide, we all watch in stunned amazement, wondering how those who have built notoriety and fortune could possibly have been so unhappy. But if you think about it, there are many of them among us right now, in our offices, at conferences, and at home. I personally see them all the time, and I know how they got here. Are you wondering whether your high-achieving ways are missing their aim too? If so, in today's episode, I want to offer you a way to self-diagnose and admit the problem even further. Answer to yourself this private questionnaire that no one's ever going to see but you, the following questions that I'm going to run by you with yeses or with nos. Do you believe you don't have everything you want yet? Does the success of others make you jealous, annoyed, or resentful? Do you have trouble sleeping? Do you spend many moments a day in anxiety? That means replaying conversations and running doomsday scenarios of possible failures and rejections. Do you frequently experience sadness, negative emotions, and moods? Maybe even making it hard to get out of bed sometimes? Do you feel an unyielding pressure not only to perform, but to outperform your peers? Do you feel like you do many things, stay in relationships, maintain participatory status, out of obligation or out of FOMO? If you have answered yes to more than 2 of the above, you are in the company of most overachievers, and you are in the clutches of aimlessness. For overachievers, this is common. It's based not only on correlational or observational findings from my one small coaching practice. Research at large suggests that not only are you anxious and aimless, but that you're also much more likely to be depressed at actually more than double the rate of the public. For example, the prominent Stanford psychiatrist Michael Freeman found that nearly half, 49% of entrepreneurs in his study who were very successful said that they experienced mental health issues at some point in their lives. All too often, depression and anxiety, like aimlessness and like addiction, they may not be readily apparent either to the individual suffering from these challenges or to people like me who are working and living alongside them, which complicates things further. You just look so high functioning, you know? So I'd like you to see yourself and help us see you, and that's why I offer you the self-diagnosis tool. If you can relate to any of the above, the hardest part will be, as I said in episode 1, admitting that you have a problem and that something is remiss and that you feel lost. But if you can do this, you will start the climb up now. Now, if you're cringing right now or this episode is making you super uncomfortable, it's likely that you do feel lost, but it might take you a little more time to get to a place where you're ready to hear this. Hear anything like the content of this episode, let alone admit that you are lost and be ready to ask for help. For now, you'll just take it out on me. You'll continue the numbing patterns and enjoy them, and that's fine. Like I tell my clients, there's no shame in the game. It's just a shame if you stay there. However, if in contrast you're nodding in resonance with what you've heard so far, we're striking a chord here, then you are about to strike gold. You're not only in great company, as I said, but you're open to listening, and what you're about to hear will help you. Your way forward will be to stare right at the abyss, at the feeling of being lost. You know, we all start our spiritual journeys from a similar place, which is descending into a blur and asking a lot of questions to which the answers may not come for a while. The best thing to do is just get comfortable with the darkness, and that really is all the next step is. Get comfortable for a while with darkness. Okay, it's time for today's tool. Today's tool is similar to the tool presented at the end of the first episode. I ask you to bring awareness to your dissatisfaction, to the fact that you do feel lost, just like I asked you then to come to awareness about where your worldview may more dominantly be, even if you want to feel highfalutin. Now, I know you want to do something. You probably are very action-oriented as a high achiever. But as you've learned, external solutions, potions, tonics, band-aids, action, they get you nowhere. I want you to go into your mind. I want you to feel your feelings. I want you to just sit with observation and examination, like a navel gazer. Or as I like to call it, like a deep thinker. Bringing awareness to how you feel next, not just your worldview, but how you feel, and being ready to feel discomfort, like aimlessness, like restlessness, like loneliness, like emptiness. This is what will allow you to find your way to real safety. It is the first critical step towards your journey back to yourself, back to wholeness, and back to integrity. Unless you allow yourself to feel that this is not ideal for you, you will not change. If you really want to do something active, I do have something extra as a next step. It's an exercise I've offered many clients, and the same thing I once did when the systems of my life weren't where I wanted them to be. Grab a piece of paper or a notebook and sit down to write out a dream map of your life. This is simply a form of written vision board that clarifies to you the delta between where you are now and where you truly want to be. As you do so, map out each facet of your life and what it would look like if you were truly happy, truly free. This can include marriage, children, extended family, friendships, professional networks, social media even, networking, investments, travel, physical fitness, self-care, beauty, transportation, you name it. If you have other areas of your life you want to map out, go for it. You're going to soon see that life fulfillment means and needs so much more than what happens on the work front or on the outside. Now, you have not only a clear view of where you are, but also of where in general you would like to go and what it'll feel like when you get there. For a deeper dive into all of these ideas, the book is Gilded, Breaking Free from the Cage of Ambition, Perfectionism, and the Relentless Pursuit of More. I'd love you to grab your copy right now on www.breakfreewithgilded.com. In our next episode, we'll go even deeper into the feelings. I hope for now you're brave enough to just stare at them, sit with them, and look at the abyss. I hope this episode and tool and exercise served you well. Thank you so much for listening. If you loved today's show, please take the time to subscribe to the Coached Podcast and leave us a 5-star review. I'm going to see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Coach Podcast.